For over 100 years, King Tut's golden mask has been the face of ancient Egypt. It is iconic, but it might actually not be his. Today, we are diving into these staggering treasures found in Tomb K562, including the evidence that suggests this legendary mask was originally stolen from the tomb of the beautiful Queen Nefertiti. From hidden chambers to a rushed burial, here are 5 incredible discoveries from the most famous tomb in history. Secrets of the mask revealed. King Tut's Arari mask is one of the most famous objects in the world. It's not only a symbol of the boy king, but of all of ancient Egypt itself. Museums present the mask as a portrait of a teenage monarch who died suddenly and left behind a perfect likeness. For the last 100 years, they've been saying his mask is a direct reflection of his face. But now, those very same scientists are starting to change their mind. Recent laboratory tests have pushed scholars to reassess the mask because, as it turns out, it may have meaning the mask was put together from different pieces. Under microscopes, researchers saw tiny solder lines where the metals were joined, portraits like you see at the Louvre. These are faded paintings on temple walls and inside dusky tombs. Researchers found that the chin of the mask doesn't really look like Tut's chin. The York team argued that the mask's chin matches Queen Nefertiti much more closely than King Tut. They reached this conclusion by comparing documented facial geometry and pointing out that the alignment works better for the queen than the teenage king. Even with these discoveries, nothing was definitive. So, the team kept analyzing. Microscopic studies revealed cut openings at the ears interpreted as pierced ear sockets. Professor Joanne Fletcher noted that royal men of King Tut's era did not typically wear earrings after childhood. King Tut died around 18 or 19 years old. A Arari mask made especially for him would not need openings for earrings, which were likely worn exclusively by women and young children. Fletcher said the earrings reinforced the idea that the mask was repurposed to fit him. All the evidence points to the mask being pieced together from what must have been the Arari mask of Queen Nefertiti. Tutankhamun's sudden death likely caused a rush to get the mask finished, which is why he didn't have his own special one made for him. When Howard Carter uncovered the tomb in 1922, it stood out because of its size. Pharaohs were supposed to have grand burial complexes with huge burial chambers. Yet Tut's tomb was small and tucked into a side corridor of the Valley of the Kings. Why such a small tomb? For the last century, scholars believed it was meant for someone else. Someone maybe queen-sized, not king-sized. Just looking at the tomb, you can tell that everything was rushed. The wall paintings show signs of hasty completion. The treasures appear crammed together like someone trying to quickly load a U-Haul. The rooms feel cramped. The whole space gives off the impression of a rushed operation. It matches what you'd expect to find in a tomb that was supposed to be for someone else. It also matches what you'd expect to happen when a young pharaoh dies unexpectedly. Tutankhamun was possibly in a fatal chariot accident around 1323 BC. It's unlikely he had a tomb ready to go. A proper royal burial required years of planning. His court did not have years to get his tomb ready, so they presumably scrambled. If a Arari mask already existed for another high-ranking figure like Tut's own mother, it surely would have been used for her son. If that figure was female, they would just need to tweak Nefertiti. It implies she didn't just rule as a queen consort, but likely as a full pharaoh, possibly under the name Anka-ir-Nefer-Neferetin. If Nefertiti had her own pharaonic mask, it confirms she had attained the highest possible status before her death. The fact that her equipment was reused for Tutankhamun's suggests a deliberate effort by later regimes to minimize her legacy or simply treat her unfinished or unused burial goods as stuff for the next ruler. To be clear, no one is entirely sure how King Tut died. Some say it was a drunken chariot accident, and others think it was King Tut's health that finally caught up to him. DNA studies suggest he suffered repeated bouts of malaria. King Tut also showed congenital issues from inbreeding in the royal family. You know how it was. CT scans of his mummy revealed that he had a club foot. Embalmers even placed walking sticks next to his body so that he would have an easier time getting around in the afterlife. While the young king was married and had children with his wife, most of them died before they were born or immediately after. Several jars hold the remains of tiny babies that were most likely King Tut's daughters. He was riddled with health problems, but even so, no one seemed to have expected him to die at such a young age. The idea that King Tut's golden Erari mask was originally crafted for Queen Nefertiti is one of the most provocative ideas in modern Egyptology. Perhaps the most exciting implication is the physical location of Nefertiti's remains. Nicholas Reeves famously hypothesized that if Tutankhamun is using her spare mask, he might also be using her spare tomb. Reeves argues that Tut's tomb, KB62, is unusually small and shaped like a queen's tomb. Was not careful or respectful in any way. It was absolutely destructive. Howard Carter was the leader of the archaeologists who found the tomb. His team faced a huge problem with investigating the actual mummy of King Tut. The problem was that the mummy had fused to its coffin. It was stuck to the wood because of the pitch-like resin that had been poured over his mummy wrappings to preserve the king from decay. The very embalming juices that preserved him also stuck him to the coffin like a glob of hardened honey. If this were today, it wouldn't have been a problem. We have a lot of Egyptologists who would treat Tut's corpse like a priceless piece of china, but not archaeologists in the 1920s. They left the tomb in direct sunlight for a while, hoping the heat from the sun would melt the resin. It did not. His tomb had been discovered on November 4th, 1922 in the Valley of the Kings. The discovery immediately sparked global fascination. Newspapers and journals reported the treasures inside, and the world quickly fell into Tutmania. It was a craze that celebrated the boy king and his artifacts in a way that hasn't really happened since. Despite the public excitement over King Tut, the excavation was painstakingly slow. And as you know, we have some very short attention spans. Cataloging the thousands of items in the tomb required care and time. Bureaucratic friction with the Egyptian government further delayed the process because the British were essentially stealing everything they found. Carter needed to keep bringing new discoveries into the public eye to keep everyone engaged. It was the 20s version of getting clicks. So, 3 years after the tomb was opened, Carter's team was finally ready to open Tutankhamun's innermost coffin. Inside, they found the mummy entirely stuck to the coffin by resin. After so many failed attempts to peel Tutankhamun free, the guys resorted to hot knives. They heated up some knives and tried to cut Tutankhamun out of his grave. So what happened? They accidentally cut his head off along with his Erari mask. A later autopsy revealed the full extent of the mutilation caused by Howard and his team. Tutankhamun was decapitated, with his arms removed at the shoulders, elbows, and hands. His legs were cut at the hips, knees, and ankles. The torso was severed from the pelvis. How freaking big were these knives? How hard is it to remove a mummy from a wooden box? These so-called professional archaeologists hacked Tutankhamun apart. Then they tried to fix the situation by gluing his body parts back together. And to make things truly diabolical, they covered it up. Only thanks to photographs captured by Harry Burton do we know the gruesome reality. In some of the priorities of people only 100 years ago, it shows that people in the 1920s didn't really care about the people they were digging up. They wanted treasure, money, and fame. But then again, I already knew that mummy unwrapping parties were a thing in Victorian England, and that should tell you all you need to know about the general frame of mind back then. People had parties to unwrap a dead person, and then they would crush them into a powder and ingest them. The King Tut situation is reminiscent of the archaeologists who went to Sudan, found the Nubian Black Pyramids, and knocked the tops off of them, hoping there was treasure inside. The 19th and 20th centuries are full of destructive archaeological incidents. Carter's team achieved extraordinary feats in uncovering one of the world's most famous tombs, but their methods inflicted permanent harm on the very subject of their study. And that is why I want to introduce you to someone who was very much the opposite of Howard Carter, the Sherlock Holmes who saved King Tut's treasures. Saving King Tut's treasures. No archaeological discovery has captured the world's imagination like the tomb of Tutankhamun. Hidden in the Valley of the Kings, the boy king's final resting place had escaped the plundering that ravaged most neighboring tombs. When Howard Carter finally breached the sealed tomb in 1922, he uncovered a staggering trove of treasures. There were more than 5,000 artifacts, almost all of them perfectly preserved after more than 3,000 years underground. Trinkets, thrones, ceremonial shields, iconic footwear, and chariots emerged as symbols of ancient Egypt's grandeur, dazzling scholars and the public alike. The treasures were exquisite, but they were also incredibly fragile. A few millennia underground had rendered them vulnerable to decay the moment they were exposed to air and light, and especially touch. You can't go poking at relics older than most civilizations, or they tend to evaporate into dust. Without immediate conservation, these marvels of history might have been destroyed within days, or as soon as Howard or one of his cronies stuffed them in their pockets. There are rumors that the best treasures didn't end up in museums, if you get what I'm saying. Anyway, the responsibility for preserving the treasures fell to a remarkable man named Alfred Lucas. He was a chemist whose ingenuity would save Tutankhamun's legacy for generations. Born in Manchester in 1867, Lucas arrived in Egypt in 1898 and quickly rose through the ranks of the Egyptian civil service. He became chief chemist for the Geological Survey Department, but apparently that wasn't enough. Later, he was promoted to director of the Government Analytical Laboratory. His work in forensic science, often appearing in court to provide expert evidence, earned him the nickname Egypt's Sherlock Holmes. He had a sharp eye for detail, a steady hand, and a rare ability to combine scientific rigor with practical problem solving. When the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb made headlines, the Egyptian authorities immediately dispatched Lucas to assist Carter. Lucas set up a makeshift laboratory in the empty tomb of Seti II, located near the newly opened Cave 62, Tut's tomb. Every artifact that emerged from Tut's tomb passed through his careful scrutiny. Fragile pieces of treasure were cleaned, repaired, and stabilized before being transported safely down the Nile to Cairo. For Lucas, this was no simple cleaning job. It required intimate knowledge of chemistry, materials, and the decay processes that threatened the ancient objects. The methods Lucas used were painstakingly precise. In the New York Times, he described his job as ascertaining the composition of each object and determining the cause of deterioration. So, he had to figure out what was causing each object to wither away and then come up with a way to stop it. It sounds like a lot of work for one artifact, but our buddy Lucas had 5,000 to deal with, and the cause of deterioration could change a lot from one object to another. Some items required drying to remove dampness, while others needed delicate chemical treatment to dissolve mineral deposits that had formed over the centuries. He cautioned that any error, either in the nature or method of treatment, would do incalculable damage. Every artifact was unique, requiring a tailored approach. Which treasures were the absolute biggest headache to deal with? Anything made of wood. The ancient Egyptian wood had survived against all odds, but centuries underground had left it shriveled, with paint or plaster peeling in delicate flakes. Lucas devised ingenious methods to preserve all of it. He used paraffin wax dissolved in benzene to fill cracks and stabilize surfaces. Loose paint or plaster was carefully reapplied using a solution of celluloid and amlac acetate. And to be completely transparent with you, I don't know what the heck celluloid and amlac acetate is, but it sounds very sciencey. Wood was tough, but leather presented a different challenge. Most of the leather in King Tut's tomb had disintegrated or hardened into black, brittle, resinous fragments. Even a light touch could cause a sheet of leather to break apart. Lucas experimented with castor oil and Vaseline to soften and stabilize these delicate remnants, saving pieces of ancient leather that might otherwise have been lost forever. Pretty fascinating stuff, right? I mean, I think it's really interesting. One guy single-handedly preserved King Tut's entire tomb. I guess it's true that even ordinary folks can change history. Or maybe in this case, Lucas preserved history. His work extended to ceremonial objects such as chariots and painted models of boats, which combined organic and inorganic materials. These required multiple treatments to address warping, cracking, and chemical instability, often resulting in months of meticulous work. When all was said and done, when the last artifact was saved and Lucas could breathe easy again, 9 years had passed. Lucas spent nearly a full decade of his life sweating in a tomb laboratory to make sure that you have something to look at when you visit the Grand Egyptian Museum or the British Museum. You know, Lucas's efforts were not limited to the immediate excavation either. He published articles and books detailing the composition, manufacture, and preservation of ancient Egyptian materials. He created foundational texts for future conservators. He essentially wrote the book on how to preserve ancient history, ensuring that future scientists will be able to copy his methods. In 1923, Lucas joined the Antiquity Service as a consulting chemist, lending his expertise to other excavations and helping protect museum collections during World War II. He was all over the place, working right up until his death in 1945 at age 78. Retirement had never even crossed his mind. Lucas's story reminds us that archaeological discovery is about more than gold and grandeur. We always focus our attention on the big finds, but there is so much more that happens behind the scenes. It's about science, patience, and ethical responsibility. While Carter and his team captured headlines for uncovering the tomb, it was Lucas's meticulous work that preserved its contents for posterity. He was the quiet hero behind the glittering artifacts, the Sherlock Holmes of chemistry, in service of history. Thanks, Lucas, for all your hard work, and thanks for not using hot knives to mangle any mummies like Mr. Howard Carter. King Tut's tomb is about to collapse. Tutankhamun's tomb is now facing a crisis unlike any it has endured since its discovery. Dare I say, since it was carved into the Valley of the Kings 3,300 years ago. Recent studies show that structural damage, humidity, and erosion are threatening the survival of the burial site. King Tut's tomb might collapse soon. KV-62, as the tomb is officially designated, has suffered cracks and rock deterioration over the decades. The murals depicting King Tut's journey to the afterlife are fading, and fungal growth is spreading due to elevated humidity levels. Experts warn that without intervention, irreversible damage could occur, putting both the structure and the priceless wall paintings at risk. But that's just putting it nicely. The bottom line is that if something's not done, the tomb is almost certainly going to be destroyed. A major turning point in the tomb's vulnerability came in 1994. Torrential rainstorms caused flash floods that submerged the Valley of the Kings in silt-laden water. King Tut's burial chamber, carved into the unstable Etna shale, absorbed much of this salty water. And that was bad news. The floods eroded surrounding rock layers and triggered the fungal infestations within the tomb that continue to compromise the murals today. But the murals aren't the biggest concern. It's the whole structure. With the rocks surrounding the tomb eroded, one tectonic nudge could cause instant collapse. Etna shale expands and contracts with changes in moisture, making the tomb inherently unstable. Historical evidence shows that the area has experienced periodic flash floods throughout millennia. Ancient floods buried other tombs under mountains of debris, which protected them from grave robbers but caused water damage that only became apparent centuries later when modern scientists opened them up. Modern analysis using 3D modeling software has shown that the ceiling of the burial chamber is under extreme compressive stress. The swelling of the shale during moisture exposure increases the likelihood of structural failure. So, I guess it's a good thing Egypt's forecast is about as dry as it gets, but there are random flash floods. And one could occur that seals King Tut's tomb once and for all. Part of the structural vulnerability stems from the tomb's design. KV-62 was originally built as a small tomb and later hastily adapted to house King Tut following his unexpected death. Its smaller chambers lack the reinforcement seen in larger pharaonic tombs. This rushed adaptation likely contributed to weaknesses that now threaten the tomb's integrity. But you know what's really destroying the site? Tourism. Millions of visitors over the years have introduced heat, humidity, germs, and carbon dioxide into the tomb. These factors accelerate deterioration, particularly of the murals and pigments. Conservation measures by the Getty Conservation Institute were completed in 2019, helping stabilize the environment, but structural stresses remain unresolved. So, where do we go from here? Experts call for urgent action. Imad Mahdi from the Egyptian Archaeologists Union has recommended forming a high-level expert committee to assess risks. The committee would document damage, develop a risk profile, and issue reports for government authorities to implement protective measures. Proposed conservation measures include regulating humidity, reinforcing the ceilings, and installing removable structural supports. Will King Tut's tomb survive the century, or will it succumb to the undefendable might of Mother Nature? Place your bets in the comments. The stolen grasshopper worth a fortune. After weeks of intense debate over its murky history, a small but extraordinary artifact believed to have been looted from the tomb of King Tut sold at a London auction for over $450,000. I don't know if that's a good deal or not. The piece is known as the Guignol grasshopper. It is carved from ivory and wood, measures just 3.5 inches in length, and dates back roughly 3,400 years. That places it firmly in the New Kingdom period of Egypt, coinciding with Tutankhamun's reign. The artifact is remarkable in both craftsmanship and function. Its black and blue inlaid eyes make it look lifelike, while its checkerboard patterned wings pivot outward to reveal a tiny interior cavity. Experts believe the tiny interior compartment was designed to hold kohl or perfume. Kohl was the stuff Egyptians used for eyeliner, which makes the object a cosmetic item. The grasshopper's provenance, however, is where the story becomes contentious. Many scholars suspect that Howard Carter may have taken the artifact for himself. And this is exactly why I've been kind of harsh on Carter today. He didn't only sever the head of King Tut as he tried to wrestle him from his coffin using knives. He also is believed to have stolen objects from the tomb. After the 1922 excavation, records show that Maurice Naaman, an Egyptian art dealer, acquired the grasshopper from Carter personally. Naaman later sold it in 1936 to Joseph Brummer, a New York art dealer. Brummer's inventory card, preserved at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, notes the object was, and I quote, "supposed to come from the tomb of King Tutankhamun." Looking past the weird spelling, the inventory card seems to prove the grasshopper was taken from the tomb. But it's not irrefutable proof. It's just really convincing. In 1948, the artifact entered the collection of Alistair Bradley Martin, heir to a Pittsburgh steel fortune. Alistair bought it for nearly $10,000, which would equate to over $100,000 today. Martin's assemblage of treasures from around the globe, known as the Guignol Collection, was renowned for its rare and varied pieces. The grasshopper was among its most impressive members. The Guignol Collection is notable for other incredible items that cost a pretty penny. A 5,000-year-old Iranian figurine known as the Guignol Lioness sold for $57.2 million. 60 years after it entered the Guignol Collection, the grasshopper was sold again, this time to the Marin Gallery in 2007. Then, sometime later, it entered the collection of Sheikh Saud Alani of Qatar, who reportedly purchased it for $1.2 million. Now, let's get back to Howard and his sticky fingers. Rumors of Carter's thefts have persisted for years. After his death in 1939, items linked to King Tut were discovered among his personal effects. Recent research, including unpublished letters and recovered artifacts, has bolstered claims that Carter removed objects without proper documentation. It's like he kept some as keepsakes for himself, and then sold others to make a massive profit. Even so, Apollo Art Auctions maintains that the grasshopper's connection to King Ted's tomb remains a hypothesis. They say there's no proof. The auction house points out that no excavation photograph showed the grasshopper in the tomb. Carter never included it in any of his official inventories, but of course, that's what they would say. Not all experts agree with their interpretation of the situation. Christian Loben, an Egyptologist at Germany's museum, August Kestner, told the New York Times that he is convinced the grasshopper originated in King Tut's tomb. After scrutinizing the style of the piece, he said it matches perfectly with other artifacts from the time of the Pharaoh. He also said, "The fact that the grasshopper is in such excellent condition suggests it was stored safely in a sealed chamber." I mean, that really narrows it down, right? I mean, how many fully sealed tombs do you think have been found in Egyptian history? I'll give you a hint. The answer is one. The tomb of King Tut was the only completely intact sealed tomb ever uncovered. Did you know that the grasshopper almost certainly came from there? So, why would the auction house deny it? Because Christian Lowen argues that the artifact should be returned to Egypt, where it belongs as part of the nation's cultural heritage. The auctioneers would rather have that sweet, sweet commission. Not that you can really blame them, but still, the reasons aren't difficult to decipher. Erin Thompson, an expert on art crime at John Jay College of Criminal Justice, noted the unusual nature of the sale. She explained that other auction houses, such as Christie's or Sotheby's, typically avoid selling antiquities linked to known looters. Despite the controversy, the auction went ahead. Apollo Art Auction stresses that under UK law, any claim for restitution would require proof of illicit origin, illegal export, and timely action. None of these conditions were met, so the auction house said, "Give me the money." The Guinel grasshopper, though tiny, continues to captivate the world. It sits at a complex intersection of art, history, and controversy. It's a reminder to collectors, scholars, and the public that the allure of ancient Egypt is often entwined with stories as intricate as the objects themselves. The fact that Apollo offered the piece at auction speaks more about us than about them. Public demand for highly rare, culturally important artifacts, even when questions about provenance remain unresolved, is higher than it's ever been. People want rare stuff, and they don't always care how they got it. Thanks for watching. What's your favorite thing about King Tut? Let me know in the comments. Be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you soon for another video on ancient history. Bye.